Aloha, welcome to our talk today. This topic is super important for nurses. Super important for all of us, I think, that live in this world. I always love to talk about things that I believe would make the world a better place. That is definitely the topic that we are on to today. We're going to discuss assertive versus aggressive versus passive behavior. Now, a lot of times people get these things confused. They don't really understand that being assertive is okay. It's a good thing, right? Being aggressive is not very pleasant for most of us when we deal with aggressive people, but it helps if we have a better understanding of why maybe they're the way they are, okay? And being passive, which oftentimes we think we're just being nice, we don't like conflict, we don't want to have problems in our lives, we actually end up making more problems because we're being passive, okay? We're going to take some time, we're going to talk about the difference between these things. Hopefully we get a better understanding of it. It can help us engage with our colleagues and our managers and our patients and our families to hopefully have a better way of communicating, right? So let's just kind of start out by talking about assertive behaviors. Assertiveness is kind of like saying, I'm okay, you're okay, right? We're kind of respectful of others. We are honest, but we're tactful, right? We're sincere, self-confident. We're able to use I statements. We tend to be not really judgmental. We really want to be supportive, but we want to use the truth, right? Even though the truth can be hard sometimes, to be supportive. So assertiveness comes from a place of emotional awareness, but not emotional volatility. And what I mean by that, and we've talked about this before, it's the difference between having a difficult moment, okay, and reacting as opposed to responding, okay? If I react to you in a moment, then I'm letting my emotions lead the day. If I step back and take a deep breath and respond, then I might be able to do it from a calmer place, and we might have a better outcome. So, the benefits of assertive behavior are that you feel more self-confident. There's more freedom in your relationships with individuals because you're telling them how you feel, honestly. You're not really kind of harboring a lot of resentment, so you're not trying to get back at people. And you don't really build up a lot of tension. And you're kind of more self-accepting, even though we have flaws, right? I make mistakes. I'm able to recognize that. I'm okay with that, right? I'm okay, you're okay. And I accept you, right, when you're flaws, because you're not perfect either, right? So being assertive is more like this I'm okay, you're okay kind of a thing, even though we're all, flawed. We're humans, okay? None of us have it all figured out. Now, aggressive behavior, on the other hand, a little bit different of a story. Aggressive people tend to have this I'm okay and you are not, right? They tend to be judgmental, domineering. There's a lot of shoulds. Not only for others, you should do this, you should do that, but they place that same pressure on themselves, right? Very critical, very critical. They're sometimes honest at someone else's expense, meaning that they would not hesitate to embarrass someone in more of a public situation. They have a tendency to have this one-upmanship where they have to be one-up on everyone else. And a lot of times they use this kind of sarcastic humor in that way of behaving to kind of get to the means to the end, which is to kind of be in charge, to kind of control. The characteristics of aggressive behavior are usually that they kind of feel superior. They want to get their needs met in the short term. They don't really think about the repercussions, the long-term effects of their relationships with individuals, because they want to get whatever they want in the moment. However, this can sometimes lead to them feeling a little guilty, a little alienated, and somewhat isolated, okay? However, what you're seeing from your point of view when you're looking at them is that somebody that's feeling really confident, really mighty, and always wants to be right, okay? And so, you know, these are individuals who tend to be defensive, and they don't really take feedback very well. It's difficult sometimes to give these folks feedback. And, you know, we just have to kind of check ourselves, right? We've got to check ourselves. We've got to make sure that we are able, especially in healthcare, to admit when we've made a mistake. And the reason for that is because it's safer for our patients to come forward and say, I think I've made a mistake. I'm concerned about my patient. This is what's going on. Why? Because we're human, all right? And sometimes people that have these types of aggressive behaviors are not as comfortable with any of what I just talked about, right? Being forthright, being forthcoming about when things are not okay. All right, so non-assertive, all right, or better known as passive behaviors is you're okay, but I'm not. I am self-demeaning. I feel like a martyr. It's, you know, and you know, some people don't really know what that means. It's just kind of like I would sacrifice myself at the expense of anyone or anything to make the world a better place. We think somehow that this is a good thing, but it actually doesn't end up being a good thing. And I'm going to explain to you why. It's because of some of the things that are on this particular slide, right? They want to be accepted. Yeah, we all want to be accepted, right? But something that happens is that passive people tend to avoid conflict, okay? And when we need to be liked so much that we let others choose, we let them decide at the expense of our own happiness or well-being, then what we're doing is we are actually not taking responsibility. We're not taking responsibility for how we feel and how we need to be interacting with others, okay? So being passive is sometimes results in more conflict in the end. So see, what you're trying to do is in the short term, you're trying to, and believe me, I have been this way for very much the earlier part of my life. I want to avoid conflict at all costs. And in the short term, I'm getting that need met because I'm doing whatever I need to do to avoid the conflict. However, let me tell you, friends, it just builds up, and there's eventually an explosion sometimes as a result. So these folks tend to accumulate tension and anger, okay? They don't really make waves, so to speak, and they like things to be safe. They don't want things to really change very much. And they kind of try to pretend like, you know, they're not really hurt by whatever's happening or upset. But what's happening really is you're just building up inside. It's collecting, and it's going to come out one way or another. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit. You know, the whole idea is, well, I don't want them to get mad at me. I don't want people to be mad at me. Believe me, I agree with you. I don't like it when people are mad at me either. On the other hand, I've learned that if I'm not honest and forthright, then all I'm doing is kind of putting off the conflict for a later date. It's just avoidance. Doesn't help, okay? So, when we talk specifically about assertive versus aggressive versus passive communication, okay, that's kind of the next segment of what we're going to look at. So we just looked at the characteristics of these different types of behaviors, and now we're going to talk about what assertive communication looks like. So assertive people tend to use I statements. And what they're doing by using I statements is expressing and asserting their rights, desires, and needs. I feel anxious when you tell me, that I'm doing this wrong. I feel anxious when you tell me that I'm doing something wrong. And I'll give you an example. You're a nursing student, you're in clinical with your instructor, and your instructor corrected you in front of a patient and in front of some other students, and it embarrassed you and it made you feel anxious. You can say to your instructor, and I know you're thinking, oh, Mary Farmer, I would never say that to my instructor, but I'm saying to you, let's start practicing now, that you need to be able to say to your instructor, I felt anxious and embarrassed when you corrected me in front of the patient and my peers. I know it's hard, but it's a first step in learning how to be assertive, okay? You're standing up for legitimate rights in a way, that the right of the other person's really isn't violated. All right, you're being emotionally honest, direct, and expressive, and self-enhancing, right? So when you look at your instructor and you say to your instructor, I felt embarrassed when you, that's not reacting in the moment. You didn't just blow up at them in the moment. You waited till another time when you had an opportunity to talk to them, and you said, I felt this way in this moment when you did this. That is not aggressive. I know that we, especially a lot of us who go into healthcare, think that that is aggressive, and it's not. It's actually an assertive way to communicate that, believe it or not, people will appreciate, because you know why? People will know that they can trust you. People will know that they can trust you. Okay, so the feelings that result from this type of communication are that you feel more valued by others, you value yourself more, you feel more confident, you feel that your needs are being met, your relationships are going to be freer and more open and honest, okay? So, we need to know that we're going to be feeling good about ourselves now in the moment, right? And then we're also going to be feeling good about that interaction later. How many of you have had a negative interaction and you've laid in bed and you've thought about it and replayed it in your mind over and over again? That is called rumination. And it is very disruptive to our well-being as humans. So if you are ruminating over something, I want you to know that whatever that interaction you had was not healthy. Regardless of whether you were being, passive or aggressive, however that conversation went down, if you're ruminating about it later, playing it over like a movie in your brain over and over again. I should have said this. I should have done that. I should have oh, it'll make you nuts, okay? So recognizing it is the first step to changing the behavior. Okay, aggressive communication really has to do with more like you statements, all right? You make me feel this way. You did this. You did that. First of all, I want you all to know something. No one can make me feel any way. Somebody can have a behavior towards me, okay, that I don't particularly like or enjoy, to be on the receiving end of it. However, we are in charge of how we feel. Other people can't make us feel anything unless we allow it, all right? So, they will express their own rights at the expense of others. They will be overtly hostile. They may overreact to situations. Sometimes they want to humiliate individuals to get even. They put people down in order to keep people down, in order to, get their way, right? They're domineering. They want to win all the time, right? And even though they're, emotionally honest and direct, they're kind of doing it at another's expense, right? In an effort to enhance their self. Now, here's the thing. A lot of times, the feelings that result are that, they're kind of angry. That's what's kind of driving this behavior. They're feeling kind of self-righteous, right? They might feel superior, but later they might start to feel kind of resentful and even guilty because they know that they're getting their way by a means that is not the healthiest way to behave. They tend to save up anger. Their resentment usually justifies the way they blow up at individuals and have these emotional outbursts and this whole idea of getting even, right? So this is not a very happy, healthy way to live, but we all know individuals like this. And before I move on, I just want to say that sometimes we have a combination of these behaviors in our own way, right? Not any one person is totally passive. Not any one person is totally aggressive. Not any one person is totally assertive. We all kind of warble between them, but we all have our own tendency to be more on the side of one of these three. So I want you to start thinking about what side you lean more towards, okay? So passive, you're really kind of ignoring problems. You don't really want to express your rights, your needs, or your desires. You really permit others to infringe on your rights. You're kind of indirect. Anybody ever hear of the term beating around the bush? I always knew what that meant. But my husband had a very good way of always pointing out to me early in our marriage, gotta love those early years of marriage, that I tended to beat around the bush quite a bit in an effort to avoid conflict. So when somebody says that you beat around the bush, what they're kind of indicating is that you're not really being super direct. You're being kind of indirect and inhibited. So here I've got this image of this person, and what do? We've referred to these people as they're like a doormat, right? People walk all over them. And none of this can be intended. A lot of this has to do with how we're raised, how we're enculturated either into our culture, our family of origin, and so it's hard to learn new behaviors. So when you're passive, some of the feelings that result are that you feel hurt, you can be overly anxious and uncomfortable, disappointed in yourself, sometimes at the time, and how you handled a situation. You might feel angry later. You might experience this rumination where you just can't stop thinking about it. So you're avoiding conflict. Sometimes you might feel used, and you want to, kind of blame others for using you. But the question is, did you really ever do anything to let that individual know in a very honest way that you felt taken advantage of? Okay? Did you? Did you reach out? Did you make it clear that at any point during the relationship that you were feeling like you were being used or like you were being taken advantage of? Okay? You have to ask yourself that question. How much of the relationship are we responsible for? Because in any conflict, each party holds some responsibility for how the conflict took place. So, assertive rights. These are rights that in your everyday thinking will help you gain self-respect as well as respect from others. Number 1, I have the right to say no. Oh, it's so difficult for some of us. I mean, some of you might be listening to this and be like, Mary Farmer, I got no problem saying no. And that's good. I'm glad that that's the case. Others of you might just be like, well, when you say no to somebody, you're just being mean. Wrong. It's not correct. It's not correct. Saying no is something that we need to learn how to do in order to have a better sense of well-being, okay? I don't even really like to say a better sense of taking care of ourselves, because self-care, I mean, that's not really even something in nursing that people are appreciating being told much anymore. It's like, oh, well, you know, you're getting burnt out in the nursing field, you should take better care of yourself. And you're like, if somebody tells me to go to one more yoga class or like do some deep breathing or meditation, I'm gonna like punch them in the face, right? It's like, when do I have time? I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a nurse, I'm busy. Self-care, I don't have time for that. Let's replace that with the words well-being. Let's start working on a lifestyle where we can improve our sense of well-being. Some of the things we're talking about today are just those tools that can help us, okay? You do have a right to say no, and we can say no in a very professional way, okay? We can be competent. We can be proud of our accomplishments. We don't have to feel guilty about being successful. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? We can say, I don't know, if we don't know the answer to something. We can say, I don't agree if I don't agree with something. And it's okay to say, I don't understand, all right? We deserve to be treated with respect. All humans deserve to be treated with respect. You know, I realized that being able to admit that I don't know the answer to something has been one of my greatest gifts in life. It's been one of my greatest assets in life, to be able to humble myself and be like, well, I don't know. You know, it reminds me of a funny story. I got to tell you this story because it's just an interesting moment in my life anyway. I'll never forget the first time I was ever lecturing. It would have been around 2008. I was standing up in front of 40 students in a lecture hall. I was a brand new instructor at the time. You know, I'm still getting my content down. I'm still doing that to this day. And I'm lecturing, and it was really the first time that these little guys showed up in the classroom. And I had just gotten done giving some lecture material, and I watched one of the students do this. And I looked at her and I leaned into her and I said, are you looking up on your phone whether or not what I just said was accurate? And I was like, whoo, we are in a new era, right, for teaching and learning. If I've got students that are sitting in the classroom that can just look up on Google whether or not what I just said was accurate or not, I better make sure that I know what I'm talking about. Anyway, it's a funny story. But I've had students actually point out that what I was saying was incorrect. I mean, you know, I go back and look at these videos sometimes and I'm like, oh, that statement is not fully correct. It's okay, right? It's okay to be wrong. Just want to let you know that. It's okay. Okay. Express my needs and opinions, thoughts, ideas, and feelings. Recognize that my needs are important. And you know what? Being assertive means it's okay to feel and express anger. It doesn't mean that we react, right, rather than respond, but it is okay to be angry. It's a normal human emotion, and we feel it for a reason. Not because we're a bad person, it's because something has happened that has welled up this emotion inside of us. Now, I mentioned before, people can't make us feel a certain way, although we can take information in from our environment and perceive that information in a way that causes us to feel upset. It's normal. We definitely want to be able to have a support system, and we deserve to have a support system. So, one of the things we can practice to become more assertive is to make eye contact with people when we're communicating with them, especially with our patients, our coworkers, family. People will trust you more when you make eye contact with them. It's a known fact that people who tend to not make eye contact with you, the person on the receiving end of that feels less trust when you do not look them directly in the eye. Now, I know that culturally, some cultures don't do that. Direct eye contact is considered to be disrespectful. And I get that, and I understand that. And we do need to be mindful. We need to understand our patient's cultural background, and we need to respect that. On the other hand, if you are culturally in a type of culture who tends to be very shy and very soft-spoken and doesn't make a lot of eye contact, you want to start thinking about being a nurse and being able to work on that skill. It's a skill. Our body posture is important. Our hand movements, right? We've talked about nonverbal communication, right? We've talked about what this means. We've talked about what this means, right? I don't have to say anything, and you can tell where I'm coming from with my body language. Our vocal tone, the quality of our voice, right? So we want to practice being calm. We want to practice being direct, and we want to practice using confident body language, okay? So, ultimately, we want to hold our head high. We want to be strong, proud of who we are, go out into the world, open up our heart, and let our light shine, right? We don't need to make excuses, or we don't need to apologize for that in any way, all right? I think we're going to end there for today, and then we're going to pick up on this topic again in our next session on passive versus assertive versus aggressive. But until then, you guys have a great day. Aloha.